Again, everybody, it's Plowboy's Ghost Channel. Brought you out here and built a little fire to talk with you about something I'm seeing on other YouTube videos and maybe in a headline or two here and there. And a politician taking up this issue. If you'll go scrolling back through my videos, you'll be disappointed, but that's not the point. If you go scrolling back through my videos, you're going to find probably several places years ago that I said something to the effect of the only way this gets fixed, the only possible chance we have of correcting our situation that was getting worse, and it's still getting worse, but it is worse than it was when I said it, is through secession. Now I see the topic coming up, national divorce. Well, that's what they're talking about, secession, breaking up. And what that part doesn't trouble me, and this isn't a I told y'all so, or hey, I said it before them. What it is I'm seeing a troubling trend in people who vote the way that I do, of being misled. And you know, I don't really want to throw out a bunch of names. There's a very large channel where a warrior who is also somewhat poetic he brings up the subject, and it's by no means just him. It's a bunch of people who vote the way that I do, who are right about a lot of things, and I have a lot of common ground with them. But there are places we go our separate ways, and with him in particular, it just like Dinesh D'Souza and a bunch of other big name conservative talking heads that a lot of people who vote the way that I do like to listen to. They may have, and like in his case, they have a lot of good points, and his heart's in the right place, but he's lacking in knowledge, and it shows when it comes to any discussion or reference to what happened in the 1860s here. There is a disconnect between where we are and how we got here. There are a lot of people who buy the official myth of history, and just about every government who has held power long and effectively has an official myth to some degree or another. Ours does too. The United States thrives and exists on a myth. In this case, for this purpose, the one that I'm specifically speaking of is that the war in the 1860s was between great humanitarians who were trying to set right a social wrong, a human wrong. And that's not exactly what was going on. Now, don't get me wrong, there were abolitionists. But to reduce the argument and all the decades that led up to what happened in the 1860s is to completely ignore the facts that, of that century leading up to that point. Secession was never is nowhere in the Constitution prohibited. As a matter of fact, it was kind of a given that the people, you can look at the 10th Amendment for examples of, of how people of the day thought. First of all, it wasn't the power was not given to the central government to perpetually rule over the states or to be the central authority taking care of everything. We had a system of federalism. Federalism does not mean centralized control like a lot of people seem to think it does. It means a loose association or an association between sovereign entities. In this case, it was between the federal government and the sovereign states. The states is where the real power was, all except for a few enumerated and specific powers that the federal government was to have. I see people who want to once again canonize Abraham Lincoln and his effort, although the man specifically stated over and over again that his was not an invasion over slavery or to interfere with slavery, that he felt he had no power to interfere with it. And he was correct, he did not. It took a constitutional amendment long after his death. Get that? It was not his proclamation. It was long after his death. It took a constitutional amendment to outlaw slavery. I don't know anyone who would defend slavery, but the whole slavery thing and the reparations thing, as conceived and as perceived today, is completely illogical. It's based on a lot of erroneous assumptions. It's based on a lot of things that have been taught to school children for years and years and years as the official myth to make them believe that that's what happened in the 1860s. Not that it was a power struggle between the Northeast, which was coming, and the North, and the Northeast, especially New England, it was becoming industrialized, and there was a power struggle there between them and the Southern states, the Jeffersonian Federalists, and where they didn't want, one wanted to have any new state admitted as a state that aligned with them, and the Northeast didn't want slave states, not because the abolitionists had taken complete control of everything. I mean, in the White House there was not an abolitionist, but because they did, that's how they put people in. That was the box you got put in. It wasn't just Republican or Democrat. It was slave state or non-slave state, and it wasn't a comment on the moral good or the moral evil, but it only became a moral evil with a lot of people when they realized that their section in the political side that they aligned themselves with stood to lose control of the country and the national government, the federal government, if the other side had more states admitted on their side. You know, that would tilt their votes in Congress and their political powers. And I used to have the patience to conduct a seminar in this crap, you know, not that I was ever qualified. But nowadays, I would like to direct y'all to someone who is much more adept at it, and he does a podcast every day, Brian McClanahan. He normally works with the Abbeville Institute out of South Carolina. You will find some scholarly stuff that if you still believe in the myth of the great emancipator and that the egalitarian, you know, godly hordes came from up north to set men free, and that's all that was about. If you will watch his stuff and listen to him talk and the evidence he produces, you will see through that in a heartbeat. And for people who vote like I do, to try to act like we care about the Constitution, we care about the restoration of our republic, yet at the same time they're going to go ahead and praise Lincoln, America's first Caesar, the man who oversaw a Hamiltonian centrist revolution to take over our system of Jeffersonian federalism and the U.S. Constitution for that matter, and turn us into a centralized nation being ruled from one place, basically. The people would think that and vote the way that I do. I'm like, well, I'm glad y'all vote the way that you do, but you really don't know what happened. You really don't know what went on and why things were the way they are. Get the race crap out. I mean, there were racists in the South, there were racists in the North. There was things built with slave labor, and empires and dynasties that exist to this day that were built on the fruits of slave labor in the North, not just in the South. That was not limited. You know, all of slavery did not exist in the southern United States and in Dixie. And not all of the world profited off of the African slave trade that was only to Dixie. There was not one single slave transport ship that ever flew with a Confederate flag over it. But there were a bunch of them that flew with the United States flag over it. Let that sink in for just a minute while you're imagining the great humanitarians marching, you know, like Harriet Beecher Stowe would think or would, you know, propose. Let that sink in real good for just a minute. General Lee had freed all of the slaves within his power, all that his wife had inherited, who was, by the way, George Washington's granddaughter. He had freed them all before the war. While at the same time, Ulysses S. Grant, and he sure wasn't a Confederate now, was he? While he was marching in the South, there were still slaves at his home place back up north that were not released. Blacks were pressed into service without compensation and without their own consent by blue uniform wearing troops in the South and in the North, for that matter, in the South during the war. Anyone who thinks that Abraham Lincoln was not a white supremacist is ignoring historical record and fact. But that's all you've been taught in school. That's all you're told in the media. That's the kindergarten level, History Channel, social media, whatever crap that's on TV today, and that's what everybody absorbs, even warrior poets. And it's unfortunate because you can't propose to understand how we got here or to come up with a solution if your entire premise for how we got here is wrong. If you don't understand that Lincoln's victory in that war was a loss for Jeffersonian federalism, for our Constitution, for the old republic. There were 100 things that went wrong. There were a lot of antagonisms going on within the country at that point in time, pre-1861, pre-1860. It came to a head. Those people who wore the gray and the butternut did the same thing that all of you people, I suspect, to think that you're celebrating on the 4th of July. And all of those troops in blue, and I don't care if this runs off every subscriber I got, I'm going to tell you the damn truth whether y'all like it or not. The troops in blue were the Tories. They were the redcoats. There ain't no difference. No difference whatsoever between the two. What the southern states did in 1860 and 1861 was essentially the same thing that their fathers and grandfathers did. General Lee's father, by the way, did in 1776. And to think that as you are carrying yourself as this great American patriot, yet you're crapping all over the U.S. Constitution and the spirit of 1776 by denouncing and denigrating what happened in the 1860s to assign the position of evil to the side that were emulating those great patriots of the 1776 movement is beyond me. I know that your hearts are in the right place, but if you don't understand how we got here, you really have nothing constructive or even informative to add to help us get toward a solution. Now, what do I think about secession? I think that secession freed our ancestors on this continent in the 1770s and the 1780s. It wasn't easy. I think secession was both legal and it was well established as a precedent on this continent when my ancestors did it in the 1860s. The difference is who won and who lost, who wrote the history. And I had ancestors die in Yankee prisons, federal Union prisons, United States prisons, prisoners of war, who would not take the oath of allegiance back to the United States. Now, did that mean that they were unpatriotic? How could that mean they were unpatriotic if they were emulating their fathers and grandfathers? Remember, patriotism in the 1770s wasn't undying, unflinching, unquestionable loyalty to the central United States government, or to their government, the British government, but now in the 1860s, patriotism was not unflinching, undying loyalty no matter what to the United States government. And any of y'all who think that that's what patriotism is today, my country right or wrong, you're part of the problem. You want to know how we got here? Look in the mirror. There's no easy road, because how we got here, Lord, I'm cooking, y'all. How we got here was not a short road, was not a short path. There is no easy road to the fix. Just like with the left's gun push and the people, we know the people at the top, anti-gun push. We know the people at the top don't buy the crap. Most of them don't. There's some stupid ones at the top too, don't get me wrong. But we know that it's about control and being able to remove the people's ability to stand against whatever tyrannical ambitions they have. We know that. It's just hard to see good people led astray. And even when good people who are meaning to lead don't mean to lead people astray, and they do. It still irritates me and bothers me. It don't mean that I don't like certain warrior poets. It don't mean that I don't enjoy their videos. It's just when it comes to, just like with Dinesh D'Souza, just like with a few other well-known, very vociferous people with shows who really don't have anything to add. They get a few things right here and there, but when it comes down to the details, they've bought the easy History Channel kindergarten level myth, hook, line, and sinker. And when it comes to working out a solution, how can you possibly work out a solution when you don't know where we're supposed to be, how we got here? You know, if you don't understand any of that, what do you really have to offer? Do I have the answer? Hell no. I don't want to be president. I don't want to be a leader. I just don't want nobody believing stupid crap, because we sure ain't never going to, you know, the person who may come up, or the people who may come up with a solution, if they don't hear the truth, how are they ever going to help us? Anyway, I ranted a little bit, got off in the weeds a little bit. There you go. I may have run a few people off. I'm going to tell you right now, I feel on the 4th of July, I think about what those men did and the risks they took standing against their own nation. And I don't ever see any equal in someone who takes their nation's position even when their nation is wrong. The United States government was wrong in the 1860s. Not over an issue of slavery, because it wasn't about slavery. Until 1863, when Lincoln was facing re-election and quite a few battlefield losses and waning support for his war. Then guess what? Republican God himself, the Republican deity, pulled out the race card. He pioneered the use of the race card on a presidential level. That's not my hero. You don't like the central government stepping all over the states and the state powers, your sovereignty, your constitutional rights? I don't. If you don't, you need to recognize where that came from. Everything that Lincoln's victory gained is your problem now. It's my problem now. There's no easy answers, because we didn't get here easily. The truth is that if we can't admit what really happened, if we can't study what really happened, get out Thomas D. Lorenzo's book, The Real Lincoln. Read something other than what the official myth regurgitation is. Y'all quit playing Democrat and Republican. We know that Democrats in 2023 are wrong about damn near everything. Republicans are wrong about some stuff too. And if I don't support one, does that mean I'm supporting the other? Hell no. What kind of small, narrow mind thinks that? You should never be willing to accept the lesser of two evils unless the lowest common denominator, the lowest common electable denominator, you think is your savior. I don't get that. So anyway, quit ranting. All of y'all who don't like shorts, and I don't like shorts, but I see how much they grow channels. They're a quick little way for me to get little thoughts out, stuff I want to hit real quick and not take up a lot of your time. I've ranted a lot. I guarantee you hardly anybody's watched this whole thing. But I challenge anyone who don't like what I've said, don't take me wrong, I want to keep subscribers. But I'll challenge anyone who don't like what I've said to refute it with fact. You can't. If you get down to the real sources, like I said, Lincoln Douglas debates of 1858. You want to say how Lincoln was a white supremacist? Use his words. I had people unsubscribe from me when in a few videos ago when I mentioned Lincoln and using his own words. I had people unsubscribe from me because they didn't like what I said about him, and I quoted him. I don't get it, y'all. Anyway, I'll shut up and go on. Maybe I'll still have 10 subscribers after this video. Talk to y'all later.